Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I wanted to talk about two events that took place on September the 16th, 1920. Today's date is September the 16th, 2018. So I'm talking about events that took place 98 years ago, but two events that were very important in various parts of history. First off, in New York City, on September the 16th, 1920, on Wall Street, where the House of Morgan was, which was the headquarters of J.P. Morgan. Across the street was Federal Hall, which of course was later on called the Customs House, but we still call it Federal Hall. Even though Federal Hall itself was torn down in 1812, the Customs House has been there since 1844, and today it houses a museum in which we call it Federal Hall. And so there was a donkey cart put right by the window on the street, on Wall Street, right by the House of Morgan. And at noon on September 16th, 1920, as the clock tower was ringing at Trinity Church at the summit of Wall Street, there was a massive explosion in the donkey cart. Massive. Now, over 30 people were killed. Hundreds were injured. Cars were thrown through the air. It's incredible. Now, who did this? We don't know. They never found out. There was threats from what was called the Black Hand, and lots of other groups got onto the bandwagon of making threats about what they did. But to be honest, nobody really knows what happened exactly. But it was one of the terrible moments of terrorism in New York City. We have a habit of not thinking of terrorism taking place until much later. But terrorism goes back all the way to the beginnings of our history. If you take a look at the Barbary pirates and things like that, you'll find some very interesting things going back to the dawn of the United States. But that explosion took place. Now, in the front of Federal Hall, which is a magnificent building, that was the Customs House, and it is a magnificent example of a Greek Revival architecture. And that was, as I mentioned before, built in 1844. In front of that structure was a large statue of George Washington. George Washington taking the oath of office. It was put there in the 1880s in honor of the 100th anniversary of Washington's inauguration, which took place in New York City, because we all know that New York City was the first capital of the United States under the Constitution. That might surprise a few people, but nonetheless, that statue was there when that explosion took place. And if you go there, take a look at the base of that statue. They have never repaired it. There are holes in it all over from that explosion 98 years ago. Someday they're going to have to replace the base, obviously, and that base should be put in a museum because it basically contained the implements that caused such mayhem and horror on Wall Street. And today people don't really think about it or know about it. But it was a very, very important moment on this date because it showed very much so that terrorism was very much alive. The other event that took place on September the 16th was very different. It didn't have an influence on life and government and things like that, but it did have a great influence on us historically and artistically. Because on September the 16th, 1920, the same day as that explosion, Enrico Caruso made his last recordings at the Victor Talking Machine Company in Camden, New Jersey, recording some of the pieces in Trinity Church, if not all of them. And when he recorded his last piece on that day, September the 16th. He would never sing before the horn again. And he would die the following year, August 2nd. So he had less than a year to live. It's unfortunate. He was still very much in the prime of life. But there was a change in the voice, but that happens as we get older. He's a very different voice from 1902 when he started recording. But it was a very cultured and fascinating voice. And he left us in his prime, which was probably a good thing now, we can say historically, without hurting people's feelings. But heroes always know when to leave the scene. So, two events that took place on that same day, September the 16th, 1920. One was a terrible, heinous explosion, and the other was the end of a career that had entertained millions.